on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's episode of Outside the Arena. I'm Griffin Senek. Alongside me is my co-host Devin Bernstein. Happy to be back after a little 3 week or so hiatus. A little more consistency coming your guys' way. Don't worry. And a lot has happened. NBA playoffs. We've got a finals matchup: Mavericks versus Celtics. I don't think either of us predicted the Mavs coming out of the West when these playoffs started. Celtics, though, I mean, they just kind of pretty easy road for them. We'll talk about that in a bit. Going to talk some baseball as well, too. Tomorrow, June 1st. So first 2 months of the season, basically completely underway, or not underway, completely done. I don't know what I'm trying to say. So a little more clarity on kind of some situations, how some teams are performing. We'll talk about that. But we're going to start things off with the NBA. And I mean, I think we should start with the series that wrapped up last night because that was maybe not as close of a series, but more entertaining, I think, at least. Mavericks, Timberwolves. And, we talked about it. I remember it feels like an eternity ago, but the last podcast about Anthony Edwards, and you have all of these, Michael Jordan comparisons starting to roll in. And we kind of both said, like, at some point, like, we're going to see like this narrative about Ant Turner. And I don't think people have started to hate him, but it's already kind of flipped off from last series after a disappointing series performance. I mean, Dallas, Luca just took care of business at the end of the day. Your thoughts on the series? I mean, obviously, this Luca Kyrie duo just seems to be almost unstoppable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's so like simple how they've put the rest of the team around them. And I don't think that they were planning on only doing it this way, but it is kind of funny how they've built, two dynamic star guards with your very typical like lanky 3-and-D wing and Derek Jones, your very typical like well-built, modern day 4 and PJ Washington. You have your two very similar centers who basically play equal minutes overall. You have outside of that, Josh Green is kind of your just typical 3-and-D wing. He doesn't play a ton, but when Derek Jones is 0 for 3 from 3 and they have to play Josh Green for, 22 minutes in a game, they're going to be fine. And then, Kleba's been hurt for most of the playoffs, but he came back healthy kind of right in time for the Celtics series. He's going to obviously have time to get healthy here. Um, I guess the good thing about the finals, it's a week until the first game, that everyone watching this won't be like, well, we already know what happened that week. But besides that, I do think Kleba could be interesting just because he can play the 5 and kind of give you a spacing option if you want to go with that. If Porzingis is playing, he could be a good matchup for Porzingis. If Porzingis is not playing, you kind of want to put him on, Tatum. And, obviously, if Porzingis is or isn't playing, it is going to be something to figure out where you're putting your centers. I'd imagine it will be mostly on Porzingis and Horford. Um, but it's not like those are the perfect matchups because those are guys who will shoot, 8 threes in a game if you leave them open, and on certain nights they'll make 4 or whatever. Porzingis obviously a super super talented offensive player. So that's obviously a big swing there, as is of course the Porzingis health. I mean, I don't really know what's going to happen. He has a ton of time here, but just based on the fact that it's just kept on getting pushed back. I just think this is the type of injury that they're kind of keeping it open because it's the playoffs, but I don't think they're truly expecting him to play, at least not until later in the series. Just because it was like, he's going to be out a minimum of several games was the first report, which is a classic, makes no sense report. But then it kind of just kept going and going. It's sort of similar to the Giannis injury earlier in the playoffs. So again, I just ultimately think he might not be quite himself this series. But my point is, regardless, I do think, Kleba could give you some interesting looks there. If you want to put like a Luca on Horford, because Horford, I'd imagine, isn't going to go and, back down Luca in the post. And for what it's worth, I think Luca's kind of strong enough to not get cooked there. But um, yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be an awesome series. I'm now realizing I'm kind of going into the preview more more than the reaction from the Timberwolves series and the game last night. But yeah, I mean, Luca and Kyrie are just freaking awesome. I mean, obviously the number one thing I would say is just that there's no right answer to anything with Luca unless he has bad teammates, and he really doesn't have bad teammates. He has really good teammates now. It's like, you know, if you're gonna trap him off the pick and roll, he's gonna kick it to Kyrie or kick it to Lively, who'll make a nice play there. Lively, like underratedly, makes really good plays, or off the short roll there when Luca gets doubled. If you're gonna drop, I mean, I think Luca is personally offended by this. He's like, "You're really gonna let me just shoot over you?" And I think he's kind of right because I mean, ultimately, it's just like you're giving Luca, an uncontested look or the chance to create an uncontested look. I don't think that's gonna work. Um, but if you try to rotate, he's gonna fling it across the court to a wide open PJ Washington or Derek Jones who hasn't missed a corner three, or maybe you're going to be able to close out to them, and then they kick it to Kyrie, who isn't now with Karl Anthony Towns closing out to him, and basically no help defense from all the rotation they've been in. It's like you're kind of screwed no matter what, unless the Mavs just miss shots. And that will be a thing. Like there's going to be a game in this series where the Mavs miss some open threes, and that's the most obvious thing ever, but that'll play an impact in a couple of these games. um but ultimately, I think this Mavs offense isn't the is I mean, really, we were saying it about the Wolves, this is the best defense we've seen at least since the bubble to me. I mean, I really don't think you can discredit the defense. Was it quite as good as it was against the Nuggets? Did they match up quite as well as they do against the Nuggets? Maybe not, but did they have an awesome defensive performance against the Nuggets? Absolutely. And are they the best suited team to stop anyone in the NBA? I still think so. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine that the Celtics would be able to do something throughout the series that the that the Timberwolves really couldn't. I would think the only possibility would be, just much more switchability, but because 1 through 4, I'd imagine they're kind of fine with all those guys guarding whoever. That's I guess that's the one thing where with the Timberwolves, you have Cat and Conley, which maybe you don't want them on a Luca or Kyrie quite as much. But I mean, just overall, I don't think the Celtics are a much different defensive team from the Timberwolves at all. I mean, I think the rim protection is obviously a big thing with Porzingis, but to be honest, I don't know, if a fully healthy Porzingis would be able to manage Luka on the perimeter, trying to get him switched on to him, or exactly what they would, do schematically. Um, so I don't know. I mean, Luka kind of really struggled the first series for the most of it, and then kind of the beginning of the second series, we kind of started to hear he's a fake numbers, empty numbers guy. Then he kind of gets a little more healthy and then just immediately becomes a freaking monster. I mean, given how badly he started the playoffs, the fact that I don't know exactly what the stats look like right now, but I think it's something along the lines of a 30-point triple double, like 39 and 9 or something. And it's like this guy is like, maybe his 39 and 9 is 2% more ball dominant than most other guys 39 and 9, but he kind of just walks into these numbers to the point where I think you just can't even think of him as any worse than a top 3 offensive player in the game. um yeah, I mean, I think I just ultimately think that the Mavs have the best player in this series. And I think there are going to be some games in crunch time where it feels like they kind of have the 2 best scorers at least. Just with how Kyrie has been playing, like if he keeps that up, I mean, I really don't see quite how they lose this series. Just because I think they're so dominant to the point where it doesn't really matter who's guarding them or what the other team is doing, like I've said. Whereas with the Celtics, it's like I do think Brown and Tatum will have a great series, but like, I mean, this will be the best defense they've played. Like that is not a discussion. This Mavs defense, I think over a full regular season would be in that top 5 to 10 range. Um, and they just played the Pacers, who are bad defense all regular season. And before that, they played the Cavs, who really don't have the best personnel to match up with them, and were missing Jared Allen the entire series. Um, and the Heat, who you could say a similar thing for, and they were also missing Jimmy Butler the whole series. So, I mean, I don't mean this to discredit them, in the sense of I don't think, we should have made the finals two West teams. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But um, when I look at who the Celtics have played in this playoff run, I don't think any of them come close to what the Mavs do defensively, and I obviously don't think anyone has those two superstars. Um, but I mean, yeah, they kind of walked through the East, but at the same time, it's like, why do you have three close games with the Pacers? Like, that shouldn't
Yeah.
be happening. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, everyone says like, oh, these are the expectations we only have for Boston, like whatever. I mean, to be honest, if the Mavs played a Pacers level team who was missing Tyrese Halliburton for most of that series in the conference finals, and they really tried to lose a couple of those games, I wouldn't be super impressed either. I mean, the Mavs to me have played they kind of, it feels like years ago at this point, but they really played well against the Clippers all around. They kind of just kept on fighting against the Thunder. I mean, they were like, I thought a lot of that series that it just felt like they were a little bit outmatched. And then they fought through the Timberwolves, who, I mean, certainly they were a little bit fatigued by that series, by this previous series, but I mean, these are three legit teams they played. I don't think there's any discernible weakness on this team. Kyrie is playing the best defense of his life. Luka's playing the best defense of his life. Underratedly, a very big team because they're really only playing Kyrie, who's small. That's obviously a big advantage of having a guy like Luka who can be your point guard, but also be a really big body. Um, yeah, I mean, and a lot of those things can be said about the Celtics. They're a big team. Derek White's kind of their only small guard, but he's like an amazing shot blocker, weirdly. So, I mean, I'm not worried about him getting, bodied or anything like that. Um, I would say the rebounding could be interesting here because it just feels like, I mean, it's one thing to have a good center like Lively or Gafford, but when you have two of these guys and you can just say you're never gonna have to play more than 28 minutes on the best like at the absolute most because we have someone else that can always fill in for you. I mean, I think you saw it last night. Like, I believe Gafford came out 2 or 3 minutes into that game, not because he wasn't playing well, just because they're trying to keep these guys fresh. They're obviously very athletic, great shot blockers. Um, and I think that could be an issue for, specifically Tatum and Brown at the rim. I think they've, you know, almost gotten used to, always having shooting outside of them. Always, they're obviously great shot creators and great offenses. So they're going to get a lot of easy looks at the rim. But I think the Mavs are going to, really try to make Tatum and Brown take contested shots at the rim, which, I mean, again, you're watching the Pacers series. Like it's not that they're not playing well, but it's leading to a lot of shots that you shouldn't be getting that often in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So I mean, I'm really excited for this series. I think the Celtics, as everyone knows, have probably the best collection of talent in the league. The best, at least the best fit of talent in the league. But I mean, right now, and I guess it's always interesting when a team kind of comes together later in the season to ask, not is it fraudulent in the sense of, would they do this over a full regular season, but like, what if the Mavs had this team from game one? Like, what's their record? And the more I think of it, the more I'm like, yeah, I think this is probably like the 1 or 2 seed in the West. Like, I mean, I don't know exactly what about this team wouldn't hold up over a whole season. Obviously health is a thing, but they weren't really healthy this season. Like they kind of stayed afloat, a lot of these games starting like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dwight Powell
Yeah.
and Grant Williams, who's not even on the team, and those two guys don't really get on the court at all. Like it was a completely different team in January, along with just having an unhealthy start to the season. Um, yeah, I mean, there's nothing about this team that I'm really worried about, and I just think those two players are just gonna be really hard to deal with. So I'll lean Mavs in 6. The one thing I will say is I think there's going to be some point in this series where the Celtics kind of get punched in the mouth and they're just like, okay, this is the best team we've played. And that could kind of go one or two ways. I think it could kind of make them feel defeated in a sense, or it could wake them up because, I mean, ultimately, the Celtics team is good enough to win this series. Like,
Yeah.
um, I'm picking the Mavs, but I mean, I think disappointment would be an understatement if the Celtics don't win here. And I don't want to do any of this like legacy debates or whatever, but like the Celtics have been building since 2017, 2018 around this core. They nailed draft picks. They've nailed these trades. They've recovered from bad signings in Kyrie, ironically, and Gordon Hayward. Um, and it's like they've built this amazing, amazing team. And again, I'm not doing this to discredit who they are as a team. I think they're one of the 3 best teams in basketball, no question. But you got this path where you really weren't tested in the East. They're so well rested. They've played like what 14 games and the Mavs have played like 18 or something like that. Like that's a big difference. They've obviously been off since Monday. It's going to be a 10-day rest for them. That could also kind of go one or two ways. But my point here is like, I guess besides Porzingis, you have no excuse not to win this. And it's really not about the excuse. It's about the fact that the stars don't align like this every year. Like we saw it. We've seen it the last few years. Like, both in terms of the roster hasn't been good, but like Tatum, rolled his ankle at the beginning of Game 7 against the Heat last year. And as much as I'd like to use that against him, like if that doesn't happen, that could have been a different game. Like,
Yeah.
and my point is like, you can't just count unless you have a team about as dominant as the 2017, Warriors. I don't think you can just expect that you're going to walk through and not face challenges like this every year. And you really have to take advantage of this. Like the Nuggets, and I'm not trying to discredit them either, but they really took advantage of the teams in front of them last year. Like
Yeah.
no fault, no hate to the Heat, sorry. And again, not to, clown on the Nuggets, but I think they saw the Heat and they were like, "Oh, we can kill this team." And that's what they did. They went and won that series in 5. And I guess they did sweep the Pacers, but like I said, like that series, I mean, like you can't be, I mean, they got very lucky to win game 1. We all know that. Um, you know, game 2, I think was kind of an absolute joke for the Pacers in terms of how quickly they pulled their starters. I mean, they're down like 16 in the fourth quarter of a conference finals game and they gave up with like 8 or 9 minutes left. Like that's a joke, but outside of that, all 3 of the other games in the series were very close. And like, yeah, it's like you love to see that the Celtics are able to kind of grind out these tough ones and whatever when they're not playing their best. But I am concerned by the fact that they didn't kill this Pacers team without Halliburton for 2.5 of the games of this series. So I guess that would be a big reason I'm kind of leaning, Mavs in 6 here. I just would have loved to see if what the Celtics would have looked like against a healthy Heat or any of the healthy teams that they didn't play,
Yeah.
between the Knicks, the Sixers, and the Bucks. Like again, I would have picked them. But it would have been much better to see what they would have looked like against, a healthy Knicks team than a banged up Pacers team and a banged up Cavs team, who I think both of those teams were outmatched as it was. So again, I truly am not saying that the Celtics don't deserve to be here or that they wouldn't have won the East because I don't think that's not true. I don't think that's true. But what I will say is that this is a big thing here in terms of, they obviously haven't quite gotten over the hump. Everyone thought this would be the year. Everything has kind of broken their way besides the Porzingis thing. And if Porzingis doesn't play a minute in this series or is just completely not himself, I guess that is fair. But at what
Still not the end
point,
of the world,
like,
though.
yeah, right? I mean, I
That's
just,
not. It's not Tatum or Brown.
right? I think, and I think the whole thing is, the Celtics are a good enough team. Like Al Horford is not everyone's backup center. Let me tell you that. Um, most teams in the NBA who have a really good center are kind of, just praying that they can get through those minutes without their center. And, while Al Horford, obviously will struggle with switching onto Kyrie on the perimeter and isn't, some scoring threat outside of his jumper, but Al Horford is a very good NBA player. He's killed my Sixers and then was on my Sixers for a year and was horrible. So I certainly will not be rooting for
Yeah, I
Al
love that.
Horford. But he's a really good player. Like most teams don't have this luxury, and I can still kind of say with confidence that they have the most complete starting five, even without Porzingis. Like, Al Horford is a good center who really provides matchup issues. They all can shoot and they all can defend multiple positions. Like that's the most complete starting five in basketball to me. The depth is a little worrisome. Um, I mean, yeah, I think it looked great in the regular season that they kind of really went all in on their top six, and I still ultimately really like that decision. Or I guess I dislike it because I freaking hate the Celtics, but I think it was a good move. But I also think when you lose one of those guys, and one of Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser or Xavier Tillman is gonna play major minutes most games, like I think that's a little worrisome. I think I hate to say it, but would Tim Hardaway Jr. not be about as good as any of those guys? Would Jaden Hardy, who's kind of randomly made some appearances here, or Dante Exum, who had a great regular season, like would those guys not be major bench pieces for the Celtics, whereas they're kind of complete afterthoughts, kind of fighting to get the last spot in the rotation for the Mavs? Like I mean, it's interesting because at one level, it's like, yeah, Derek White and Drew Holiday are the 3 and 4 on this team, even when they're missing Porzingis. That seems crazy. But at the same time, like PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. have been awesome. And are you gonna win a final series because your third and fourth pieces are awesome compared to the other team's third and fourth pieces just being really good? Like I don't know. I don't think that usually happens. So, I mean, if Luka's at this level of health he's been at the last few games, and I can't imagine he'll be at a worse level of health here, I really do think the Mavs take this. Maybe I'm biased here. I'm obviously not rooting for the Celtics. I'll be the first one to say that. Um, but I mean, yeah, I think this will be a great series. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's you know, I think that the West was super fun to watch and like, speaking about the Celtics, like, yeah, like they definitely, had an easy path and like, showed that Pacer series, like they didn't play their best basketball, but they still found a way, and that's what good teams do at
That
the end of
matters
the day.
for sure.
And don't get me wrong, like the Pacers in game one, like they just threw the series in the garbage basically after that. Like they couldn't come back after. I mean, they had the game. It was just like stupid decisions, stupid passing, running out of bounds, literally. Like it was just after that game, the series was over. They may as well just have gone home and ended it there. But like Boston, like they just took care of business in the East, and that's kind of like when we were previewing this, it's like maybe if the Bucks were healthy with Giannis and Dame, maybe that would be a team that could have, forced them to 6 games or something like that. But like, no one was beating Boston in the East at the end of the day. Like, even if, I know you bring up the Knicks, like the Knicks would not have beaten Boston at the end of the day, I don't believe. Maybe they would have put up more, they probably would have put up more fight and gotten a game or two on them. I just don't think, I think Boston compared to these teams in the Eastern Conference right now they're just on a different level. I mean, they're starting five, like you said, like even with Porzingis out, like you've got two of the best defensive guards in the entire NBA and Drew Holiday and Derek White, and you've got, two of the more elite scorers in the NBA and Tatum and Brown. And then, you
And they're
know,
also both very good defenders.
yeah, like they're not like it's not like I don't know who's a really bad defender. I'm trying to think of like a
I
similar.
mean, even Luca, who we complimented his defense, like no question about it. A big advantage here is that the Celtics have two hyper athletic wings who can really defend.
Yeah.
Whereas it's that's not the case with Luca.
Yeah, and I agree with the point you bring up where like no one is really gonna ever be able to stop Kyrie and Luke. I mean, we saw it in this series. Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards are two guys that I think many NBA fans would consider elite defenders and some of the best out there. And they weren't able to stop them. That's gonna happen. It's just about limiting. And I think Boston probably presents the most total package defensively that, the Mavericks will have seen. But like you said, the same thing can go to, towards the Celtics about, Dallas is going to be the best defensive team they face. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, looking at that Dallas Timberwolves series, I mean, first of all, just super fun. And I mean, Luka, I think, there's been I don't know how many if there's been talks about I know the first series or two was maybe a little more of a challenge and he just didn't look himself. This series, I mean, this guy was just on top of the world. The game winner he hit in what was it, game two, I think. Like he is just a monster and just having someone like Kyrie who I mean, it's crazy thinking back to a year, 2 years ago, what the narrative about Kyrie was. And, it's great to see him and one, gain back all the support of the fans because he was really the villain for a while. And, also just for him personally to kind of see, that love for the game seems like it came back in Dallas. So fun to see. And, you know, it's the Mavericks, like you said, like it's just one of these things where this team just like came together. Like this was a team that kind of middle of the pack in the West for a while. Like, obviously you've got Kyrie and Luca, but just like the supporting cast was never good enough. And then it just worked. I mean, they got guys that work and, credit to that front office. And I mean, it's awesome to see, Luca have such a good team around him. He's a premier player. And, if they end up winning this series, I mean, I'm not going to go into, the Michael Jordan comparisons and stuff like that needs to stop because we saw what happened with Ant already. But not that Ant's going to be an incredible player, might win a ring or two, but these guys, like, you can't compare players to Michael Jordan unless it's like LeBron James at the end of the day. Like, it's just not fair. And it just is a stupid narrative. And I'm already sick of it. But Luca could be on his way to an all-time career, and a ring this year, I think would really propel him on that direction. Um, I thought the Timberwolves would put him more of a fight. I mean, this is such a fun team. Like you said, I think we talked about it kind of off there. Like their cap situation seems to be kind of in hell, and I don't know what they're gonna do. Obviously, I think, Rudy is probably the guy that would be first out the door. But I don't really know. It's such an interesting
I
situation.
almost think it would be Cat.
I know. I guess I give preference to Cat just because he's been there for so long. But yeah, I mean, I guess Naz Reid could probably fill his role better than
And
Rudy's.
truthfully, I don't think you're getting anything for Gobert.
Which it's so the Gobert stuff is like it's crazy. Like I feel bad for the guy. Like I've never seen hatred towards I think a player like Rudy is like it's just like everyone wants this guy to fail, and I get it. Like a four-time defensive player of the year, like, but like also like this guy's never going to be able to guard like Luka on the perimeter. Like that's just not real. Like some of the
Yeah.
greatest defensive centers, like they're not going to be able to guard perfectly on the perimeter. Like that's just I don't know. I agree. The Rudy Gobert, he's not maybe as good of a player as his accolades may suggest, but I think the hate for him at this point is a little old, and I don't know. I'm not like a Rudy Gobert lover, but like I just don't really understand fully the complete hatred. I don't know. But regardless, it's going to be interesting to see how that team kind of unfolds towards the future. I mean, a lot to look forward to, but at the same time, you got to wonder in a West like this with so many young superstars, like when are you going to get back to, the conference finals? Like it is a realistic question. Uh, I kind of talked about this, the Celtics Pacers, like, the Pacers, there's a lot to look forward to. I really do think, if they're able to bring back Siakam, Halliburton is a really solid young player. Andrew Nemhard, like he really impressed me when Halliburton was out. Like he played some incredible minutes. He's gonna be a great player. Even like guys like Obi Toppin, like I thought really improved his game this year. He could looks like a nice piece. Aaron Nesmith, Miles Turner, like they got guys for sure. I think, maybe it's a tough situation because it's like now with Siakam there, that's kind of your second like quote unquote star, but they probably need someone that's a little better than him to like seriously compete for a title. But I
Right.
also
Or
don't.
at least someone else that's like close to him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because I mean, you got Halliburton, but it feels like kind of the trend right now, at least with some of these NBA teams, is it's you've got the two superstars and then a really good supporting cast is kind of how it's transitioned. And Siakam has played really well. He's obviously a champion. I believe he's been to the All-Star game before. Like he's a great player. I just don't know if he's good enough to be that number two on like a really, really competitive team. Obviously, time will tell, and I think Halliburton himself will have to step up his game, but he's so young and keeps getting better year in and year out. Um, Still, I mean, the Pacers a massively successful season. Like, even if it doesn't matter, they got swept. Like, reaching the conference finals, like that is a huge success. They played really well. I know, the mid-season tournament or whatever, like, maybe gets a little flack, but they were really competitive in that too. Like, they showed up when the lights shone brightest. I mean, they won game 7 at MSG. I know the Knicks were belittled with injuries, but I mean, they put on like the greatest shooting display in game 7 history. So, I mean, it's impressive what they did, and they should be proud of themselves. Looking ahead to Celtics Mavericks, I'm going with the Celtics in 6 games. I think you're kind of underselling just how good this team is a little, Dev. I agree. I think the Mavericks are going to be the best team this team has faced. I think Luka and Kyrie are sensational. I hope they win personally. I just think this Celtics team is just too loaded. I think defensively, kind of like we've talked about, they're going to have as good a chance as any team at slowing those two guys down. And even if you can slow down one of those two, like even if they can limit Kyrie, I mean, that is so huge because, yes, these guys, PJ Washington, Derek Jones, Daniel Gafford, Josh Green, like they're solid role players, but these are not going to be guys at the end of the day, I don't think, that are going to go win the Dallas Mavericks an NBA title. Like it's going to be Luka and Kyrie. So if you can slow down one of those guys, and I think Celtics have a decent chance of doing so, I know probably the biggest eyes in this series are going to be on Jason Tatum and how he performs. And this is a legacy, defining series for him at the end of the day. This is a chance to shut up the haters once and for all. If he goes out, balls out, averages 30 a game, and they win the finals, no one's going to be able to say anything really about him and how he plays in the playoffs ever again. I'm sure people will, but they shouldn't. But we'll see what happens. I'm excited for this series. I think it's going to be competitive. I can see either of these teams winning. I just think the Celtics, even if Porzingis plays, I think that's only a plus for them. But I don't think they need him. I think this starting five is just so deep, and you know I think they're going to be able to cause a lot of trouble, and they've got, so many different scoring options as well. So it's going to be fun to watch. I'm going Celtics in 6 games as my prediction.
Yeah, I didn't really bring this up, but like you said, like if we get to a game 6 or game 7 of this series, and obviously those are the last 2 games of the season, no matter what, and these teams are both pretty well rested, it's like I think the depth obviously starts to matter less at that point because I mean, if you're the Celtics, like, Tatum and Brown are playing like 43, 44 minutes, Holiday and White are playing 42, and whatever old man Al can give you, you're taking. But I mean, as much as I hate to say it, that fucker is going to probably go on and play 42 great minutes for you. Like, I mean, like you said, like this is the most complete starting five. I mean, there's again, I said it with the Mavs, um, because I guess it's more of a recent thing, but there isn't anything fundamentally like attackable about either of these teams. Surprise, surprise. But um, that's like you said, yeah, I really agree with you there. Quickly on the Timberwolves, um, yeah, I mean it's weird with Gobert because I don't think the guy is overrated defensively. I really don't. But at the same time, is there a single player, of the last 8 teams who got anywhere near the minutes he got and was as bad of an offensive player? Like, and again, like it's weird because I think he's deserved bare minimum 2 or 3 defensive player of the years. Like this guy is, to me, a Dikembe Mutombo level defensive player who no one, obviously different time, no social media, different person. And Gobert is has definitely done some annoying things, but
Yeah.
no one talked about Dikembe that way because he was a great defensive player, great rebounder who wasn't the best offensive player. Like kind of actually in a weird way, a very common, archetype of player. It's just rare, I guess, that Gobert is, you get someone that impactful on your defense. But yeah, like I said, like his IQ defensively is really amazing. And offensively, it feels like he has the IQ of a 12-year-old. Like, I mean, I don't know. I sound mean, and I will certainly be the first to criticize, his passing and whatever, but like I'm just genuinely confused. Like he seems to understand that, NBA basketball and shot quality and all this stuff at such a great level defensively. Um, and it just really has never come along offensively. I mean, it's one thing, I'm not expecting a 7-1, kind of awkwardly coordinated slash built guy to become some, hezzy tween, Kevin Durant type player or even a good passer, but like just feels like he's kind of an idiot on offense. And that was a big thing in this series was like the Wolves kept trapping, the ant pick and rolls, and it would just make Gobert be the one who had to make a play in space versus, when the Wolves would do that to the Mavs, it would be lively, and that felt like a huge difference. Then it felt like, something I kind of said with this Wolves team before, and then kind of thought I was wrong about was they're kind of always having to choose between their best offensive and defensive lineup. Um, you know, and in some ways a lot of teams are, but really against the Mavs, I was like, the only way they can really put up enough points to win this game is if they go with Naz Reid and Cat. But the only way they can even have a prayer of a hope to keep it under, 120 or whatever is to have Gobert out there. And it's like that's a tough decision to be having to make. Um, Obviously, I don't even know what they were doing in terms of who was deciding these substitutions. Because Chris Finch was there but
Yeah,
he
I don't
couldn't
know
really
what was
stand.
so confusing.
Very odd situation. Obviously not like anyone's fault. That's just very Timberwolves to happen to them. They feel very cursed. So I mean, yeah, and again, I said this with the Celtics. Also, I didn't say it with the Mavs, but I think it with the Mavs, and I really do think it with the Timberwolves. It's like it feels like this was, a great outcome of a season, but at the same time, they had a chance to win a championship this year and they didn't. So, I mean, they should be disappointed, especially with that financial bill that's coming. Um, and I'll say this quickly on Cat. I mean, first of all, he's been through so much as a person, and I know, super rich, whatever, athlete, great life, whatever. He had like a ton of his family die from COVID, and then right after that got into a very scary car accident, and like is also just a good guy. So
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's like, oh, he's so zesty, it's like, come on.
That stuff is like so stupid. Like
Yeah, I mean,
especially
it's like, no, I
especially
mean, it's
Cat. Like it's not even like Cat is like sure his voice is maybe like a little like higher pitched, but it's like, you know, I mean like even the same thing with like Caleb Williams. I mean, maybe that's a little like that, word maybe with like if he's like painting his nails pink, I guess you can cut, but it's still like so stupid. Like these guys are just let these guys live. Like there's no reason to like
yeah.
it's so stupid. It's just insecurities of people on the internet at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean it truthfully is, and I guess it doesn't really matter to the actual basketball, but I do feel bad for Kat that, and truthfully, he was kind of the only one to show up last night. Like he was
Yeah.
the only one who, when they were down big, he was the only one who was like, our season's on the line. Like I'm just going to get to the rim. Like we saw that from Donovan Mitchell in game 7 against the Magic, and it's like whatever, it's the Magic. But at the same time, like when your season's on the line like that, like I really respect, and it really does matter to me, the guys who are like, okay, let's just do
Yeah.
any single thing we possibly can right now. Truthfully, I wouldn't have thought Cat would be that type of guy. So I mean, I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here with the Timberwolves, where it's like a lot of the worries I had with them, I still kind of believe in, but I'm also been super impressed on certain levels by all these guys, and is 22. Um, Randomly popped up in my head when we were talking about the Gobert thing. Could you do like Gobert for Beal? Is that a crazy trade?
I just
Because
think that would just be a bad move for Minnesota, right?
well, I guess, but
Like
I
would
guess it,
like would
I
Beal come
guess
off the bench?
I don't know. I don't know.
That
I'm just
doesn't really
saying
help the financial
it
situation.
doesn't help the finance. It doesn't really
Probably
make
makes it
sense.
worse.
It does make it worse. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But my thinking is, I do think they need some more scoring here. But I also think, like I kind of said, like what's the path, I guess, besides you find, a point
Yeah, if
guard.
they take Rudy out too, it just I feel like it's just that like it will hurt their defense. Like I
No,
think
absolutely.
he definitely is an anchor for them, whether people acknowledge that or not. Like he definitely anchors things, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do, obviously, like you said. I mean, Cat with Naz Reid there, I think you could slide Naz in to that, four, slash stretch big type role and, be okay. Losing Gobert, then, defensively down low, I think it's a much rougher situation. But obviously, I mean, the offseason is a long ways away. So, I mean, we'll obviously see what ends up happening, all the rumors, but it will be interesting for sure.
Yeah. And then quickly on the Pacers, I guess I don't really want to. No, I do want to do this. And Rick Carlisle really does not deserve to have a job. Um,
I don't get the Rick Carlisle hate. I'll be honest. I think he's like, I kind of like I get he complains a lot, but like, I don't know. I feel like the guy's done a solid job and is like, he's there for his players. Like, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think, as a getting his guys, ready to play and
That last series was bad,
yeah,
100%.
but in terms of, having a good offensive system, getting these performances out of these random players, like, it's kind of they're the only team in the NBA that I feel like you could kind of think of in the same way, like it felt like for a while, like you could put any white slot receiver with the Patriots and they'd be a stud. I kind of feel that way with the Pacers point guards is like, could kind of put this, some random guy out there and they'll kind of perform well. Because in a weird way, all three of their point guards kind of had like career years this year. Um, but at the same time, I mean, some of the rotation moves, and I guess I would have to, be the GM and be talking to him to know exactly what he's thinking, but really don't know what he could tell me to explain why, Siakam never played 40 minutes besides overtime games in this playoffs. Like, I mean, Jason Tatum played 44 or 43 or something like that minutes in a 3-0 closeout game of a conference finals because I mean, there's the obvious thing of you're going to play less total minutes if you win the series early. And obviously that's not an issue for the Pacers, but they're down 2-3-0, in a close game where Pascal Siakam is both a good all-around player and is probably their best offensive option, 80% of the time without Halburn out there. And it's like they're sitting him for like a 5-minute stretch in the fourth quarter. It's like I just don't know what he could explain to me that would make me think he's worthy of being my coach.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess I would tell him that shit's not happening again. And you're gone if you do that. But I like what you do, otherwise as a coach. And the complaining stuff is annoying. They did kind of get fucked over at the beginning of that Knicks series, so I get it. But ultimately, it it's weird because again, it's similar to how I feel about the Wolves. It's like no one expected this Pacers team to make it. They exceeded expectations. Guys are better than, even the biggest optimist of them could have been going into the playoffs. Like I thought Nemhard was a good player. I did not know Nemhard was this good. Like, same I guess I kind of thought it with McConnell, but same thing where it's like no one was expecting McConnell to be this good. But at the same time, this team isn't good enough to win a championship. We know that. We know that for a fact. And, the Hawks made the conference finals 3 years ago, but I would pretty confidently say they'd be in a better spot right now if they didn't. I mean, truly, like, you know,
Yeah, they
they
probably don't trade for DeJounte and give up those assets. And yeah, I mean, the Hawks are a great example of, I mean, they're just in kind of purgatory right now where it's like you got this team of like some good players and you'll maybe compete for like a playoff spot, but like they're not going anywhere. I mean, that team a few years ago was definitely a lot better than it is now. I think
and
you had
the
like,
Pacers will be fine
yeah,
because I think
they'll be
Halliburton
good
is a
next year. I
freaking
think the Pacers
monster.
will be
Yeah.
really nice next year.
Yes. No, I mean, I'm saying all this knowing that I would probably project Halliburton to come out at the start of next year and, have that same pace he kind of started last year on.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's interesting, like you said, the in-season tournament. I mean, that actually feels like lifetimes ago.
The
Um,
Lakers, the champions.
the Lakers. And they have a banner up for that. That's always going to be interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's like weird because it's like at that time they were kind of like the surprise new team. And then, if you talk to someone in January, they probably would have been like, oh, Pacers, like whatever. They're so like they suck on defense. They're not going to do anything. And then it was just like, okay, well, this offense clearly has something about it that is very unique because, I mean, truthfully, they're probably one of the only equal opportunity offenses in the league where, yeah, they're running a lot of stuff through Halliburton and Siakam, but like over the course of a season, these guys really aren't taking way more shots than the rest of the guys. Like, and that has its disadvantages because, you know, you see a guy like Luka controlling so much of the offense and you're like, I want to do that. But at the same time, you're gonna have five like really quality offensive players. You know, Turner occasionally looks like Kevin Durant and occasionally looks like one of the worst players in the NBA. Really don't understand that. But, you know, overall, he's a very skilled center. Obviously Halliburton and Siakam, and then kind of figure it out with the rest. It's like I like what they're building, but at the same time, I feel like they're gonna get, you know, convinced that they should, you know, prioritize keeping this team together as opposed to improving on it. Um, I mean, first of all, they did trade, you know, a lot of their assets for Siakam. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they have Matherin back next year. They kind of went through this whole run without him, but I kind of expected him to be like the third piece, or at
Yeah.
least the chance for this team to really improve. Um, so yeah, I mean, all these are interesting questions, but I do think Halliburton before the re-injury was also just not at the level he was earlier in the year. Um,
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
he's
He
I think
slowed
he's
down.
really one of the most, you know, just efficient offensive players between really doesn't take bad shots, he really doesn't turn the ball over, but he has the ball all the time. It's pretty impressive how he's able to do that. Obviously, there's some games where he needs to go out and shoot the ball more. Um, that's my other thing you know, to me, if this team had, you know, a Ty Lue, or someone like that, just a good, you know, coach who you knew was gonna tell his players the right thing, I think Halliburton would know that he has to shoot more. I mean, I think Carlisle, I think that's another mistake he made was not kind of telling, you know, Halliburton he has to be more aggressive offensively sooner. Um, but yeah, I mean, the Pacers are interesting because they looked so out of the Knicks series. They probably lose in five if Nemar doesn't hit that kind of crazy shot. Um, but then they went and kept basically every finals game competitive without their best player. So it's like I have no idea what to think of this team. They kind of operate differently than every other team. In a way. And I guess maybe that's why the minutes are a little weird, but I just couldn't. I was just mad as someone who just wanted the
Yeah.
Celtics to lose or at least, you know, take the series longer. I was just upset that they didn't even give Siakam I mean, you look at his minutes like in 2018 with the Raptors, he's like their fourth or third player. He's playing like 42 minutes a game and he played like 35 minutes a game this year. It's like there's some disconnect there. It's like, you know, generally speaking, if a coach wants to play you in the playoffs, they're going to play you 40 to 42 minutes a game. Um and that just wasn't even a consideration for Carlisle. Maybe that's how they kept through, you know, the Knicks series and all this stuff. So I guess I don't ultimately know, but I do think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Pacers go the next couple of years.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, I think with that, we can kind of move on. Obviously, as the finals get underway next week, we'll have all the coverage and breakdowns of those games. And obviously, I mean, it's fun with the finals. You got NHL going on. Hopefully, the Rangers can sneak their way in the finals. It's been fun to follow along with them. But yeah, moving on, we're gonna end today just briefly talking a little baseball. Obviously, we haven't really gotten too into it yet. I mean, Dev, your Phillies are killing it. My Mets are killing me. You know, we've seen the debut of Paul Skeens. Obviously, the Yankees have been playing really well. Dodgers have been playing really well. You know, big news this week, Ronald Acuna Jr. suffers another torn ACL, which obviously you never want to see. One of the, you know, defending National League MVP, who had, you know, gotten off to a little bit of a slow start for his caliber. You know, now out for the season along with Spencer Strider. So that Braves team definitely nowhere near 100%. Still super dangerous though. You know, that year they won the World Series, you know, in 2021, Acuna missed with a torn ACL as well, which is crazy. I mean, what's your thoughts? I'll ask you about the Phillies. I mean, obviously they've been, the best team in baseball. Their rotation has been outstanding. Their lineup, outstanding. What have you seen from them so far? And, that's really impressed you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I do not have MLB extra innings, so I'm not able to watch every Phillies game. Um, Nor would I, to be honest, before basketball season ends. Um, but I've seen, probably, between 10 and 15 total games of this team and checked obviously the box score, seen the major things happening basically every game. I mean, I think the one thing is undeniable that there's clearly something amazing with this pitching staff,
Yeah.
between the coaching and the guys. I mean, I think you know more about Matt Strom than I do, but to my knowledge, he wasn't, some amazing pitcher, kind of like an innings eater, long reliever type, kind of, I'm not to say that he's, like this is fraudulent or any. I'm just saying I don't think anyone saw this coming.
No.
um Jeff Hoffman like has actually been horrible for most of his career. He was on the Rockies, so those pitching numbers I guess will kind of look a little weird sometimes. But I mean, I think he didn't have a whip before like below 1.4 until his last 2 years, and they've been under one both years as a Philly or something like that. Um, Alvarado has turned into a great, power arm. He's not even having a ridiculous year, but he's still kind of, one of the top three guys in the bullpen there. And then, you know, Spencer Turnbull kind of came out of nowhere. He was the fifth starter at times this year, and then the Taiwan Walker experiment has continued to not work. Which I guess is almost. I mean, he and Castellanos have been the two biggest like disappointments of this team, but really besides that, everyone is performing well. So I think Turnbull again in a long reliever, innings eater type role, but also as a guy who I think is at some point going to give you valuable innings in the playoffs. You're going to have games where your starter completely fails and you have to go 7 innings or whatever with your bullpen. It's going to be awesome to have Turnbull there. Kirkering has performed well. I mean, ultimately, everyone really has performed well on this team, I guess, with the exception of Walker. Obviously, Castellanos has been a disaster. But really, everyone is doing well. I still think like haven't quite had the bright Bryce Harper, heater that he always seems to have at some point in the year. He's still kind of, sleepwalking into his typical numbers. Obviously, Alec Bohm has had a tremendous season. I don't know if he quite keeps this up, but I mean, him turning into at least in my mind, a good hitter has been awesome, obviously. And Trey Turner has been missing for about a month almost at this point,
Yeah.
maybe a little less than that. I think around the beginning of May, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but he had a great start to the year, and he hasn't even been playing in the last few weeks, and the Philly, it almost hasn't mattered. I mean, yeah, I truthfully, the last 2 years for the Phillies have really not started like this at all. And they've kind of played like this during the second half of the year. So, I mean, I guess I'm slightly worried that it kind of goes the other way this year and then they're not quite as hot heading into the playoffs. But I mean, I also just think this is the most complete team the Phillies have had in a while. Last year, Harper wasn't playing at the start of the year. Um, and then obviously, the first baseman thing didn't really quite get figured out until around August or September of last year. He's adjusted to that. I really haven't noticed him being an issue at all. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes he's like, a little, new to the position, but I don't think he's really bad on as a defender. And that's another thing is Kyle Schwarber hasn't played a single game in the field this year. Um, I mean that's another luxury that this Phillies team has kind of bought themselves between finding, Marsh, who's a good defender and a quality enough hitter to stay in the lineup almost every game, then Rojas, who, among all his struggles at the plate is an amazing defender. Um, which is a kind of a sacrifice you're willing to make with this Phillies team. So, I mean, yeah, I'm really optimistic. Obviously, my dad keeps saying like, well, it doesn't even matter how well you're doing in the regular season nowadays. It doesn't seem to matter. and I kind of agree with that, but I'm not going to pretend like, the best path to a Phillies World Series wouldn't be, starting in the NLDS and you have home field advantage all three series. I mean, I think that'd be really awesome. But at the same time, that's, the team that wins 100 games and has that path every year seems to lose to some 85 win
Yeah.
team. But again, I mean, I'm not just gonna like, I'm not gonna base my thinking off of that until, that becomes like over a long period of time. It becomes clear that for whatever reason, that's the case. Yeah, so I mean, I'm very optimistic. Bouncing around, like, I mean, I'll get your thoughts on the Phillies as well, but I mean, I've been very impressed by the Guardians.
Yeah.
The Brewers, truthfully, I had no idea had this good of a record, and they've kind of really turned around their lineup where I felt like, the last couple of years it's just been a lot of meh, and now it's a lot of guys who it's like, oh, you're a top prospect. You clearly have some tools and some traits we really like. And I mean their pitching staff has been really solid the last 2 years, which feels weird because, obviously of, trading away Corbin Burns, and it just feels like they haven't, they don't, it's not like, there's nothing about this rotation that I would think would be better than it has been the last couple of years. But truthfully, it's performed pretty similarly, or if not better. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it feels like the NL feels really thin after the top three or four teams. Obviously, the Acuna news is devastating. And this is a big joke on Twitter where it's like, oh, like a fan of another team says he never wants to see a player get hurt.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't even have to be said. But like, I mean, again, I don't like the Braves. We've beaten them the last 2 years in the playoffs, like big rival, whatever. But like, this guy is an electric player when he's right. Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, he put up I forget exactly what the numbers were last year, but some stolen base
Like
home run
40,
combination.
40
Yeah.
70 or something like
I
that.
mean, yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, so I mean he's electric. I do still think the Braves are a good team. I still think they're probably no worse than the fourth best team in the NL, maybe fifth. Um,
Cunha's season last year. I'm looking at the stats. So
yeah.
he really got to, so he had
So
100
yeah.
192 at bats this year, 4 homers, 15 RBIs, hit 250. So, I mean, he so far off. Last year, he hit 337 with 41 homers, 106 RBIs, and 73 stolen bases. Like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
And then to go
And
from that to like 4 homers and 200 at bats, like what the fuck? What happened?
yeah. It's very odd. Because he'd struggled in 22, but that was I still think
Post
it was.
ACL there.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
ACL. Yeah. I mean, so I mean,
It's
yeah,
bizarre.
yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, Aaron Judge, I guess, had some bad numbers the first,
Yeah, but
maybe
now he's got
50.
like 20 bombs.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously that'll happen in baseball,
Yeah.
but
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, very weird, like you said. Maybe something was lingering before that, or whatever. I'm not exactly sure. Obviously though, yeah, like you said, like he's electric, one of the best players in baseball. That sucks. The Dodgers. I want to hear your thoughts on the Dodgers because they they feel so like talented, but then it also does feel like they kind of have some weaknesses. Like I mean I can
Yeah.
I might be wrong here, but is like 4 through 9 of the Phillies lineup not like significantly better than 4 through 9 of the Dodgers?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, so with the Dodgers, I mean, you got like, Mookie, Shohei, Freddie. Will Smith's a really good hitter as well.
That's
Um, and then you get into like the Teoscar Hernandez, who good player. He has 72 strikeouts on the season already, which is not great in 2 months. But he also has an 812 OPS, so he's producing, but it's home run or strikeout with him. After that, it's pretty dark. I mean, Gavin Lux has not been good for them. Max Muncy looks kind of washed up at this point. I guess he has 9 home runs, but not great. And then, you know, Chris Taylor is 8 for 74. Miguel Rojas, is decent. I guess he's kind of given them, close to a good 100 bats so far. But yeah, it's the back of their lineup is definitely an issue. And then the bullpen also is kind of not great. I mean, their bullpen, it's okay, but they just really don't have that like lockdown, guy. I mean, Alex Vezia is probably one of their better relievers out there, Daniel Hudson as well, but Evan Phillips, who's I think been a little banged up, but they're kind of struggling to find a little bit in that bullpen, and the rotation's been pretty solid with Yamamoto and Glasnow, but and Gavin Stone, but there's I don't know. They're the pitching. I don't know if it'll hold up in October, to be honest. I just don't. I'm not quite sure it will. We'll obviously see. But yeah, that back of the lineup, like you said, is definitely a concern with the Dodgers. But that top half, it's interesting because I mean Mookie's still having a great year, hitting 330. But like he got out like I think he had like 5 or 6 home runs like the first week, and it's like he's only at 8. Like I didn't even realize that. Shohei's just hitting 330, 14 bombs. That's crazy. Freddie Freeman only 6 home runs as well. I don't know. The Dodgers are interesting. I think that they're a team that I don't know if this is going to be their year that they win it, but once if I think there's just a few pieces that are still like
Well,
falling into place and just like,
if,
getting accurate.
If Shohei can stay healthy as a pitcher, I mean that's
Yeah, I
another.
mean, at this point I don't even know if they can like bank on that really. I just
Yeah.
think
Okay.
Yamamoto needs a year to kind of get used to the MLB, it feels like. And, Walker Bueller's, in his first year back. Has he even pitched yet? I think he has, but I might be wrong. It looks like he's made 4 starts, 4.26 ERA. Like, who knows? I mean, I think that was his second Tommy John. So, if who knows, if he'll get back to form. But I think this Dodgers team, no doubt about it, they're going to be, up there with the Braves and the Phillies, come October. But, it wouldn't surprise me if it takes this year to get to next year when their dominance, really, really, really kicks in. Um, but they're still, I mean, what are they, 36 and 22? Like this is still a great team. Glasnow's been great. But yeah, there's definitely some holes on this team that need some work.
The Royals are 35 and 23.
The boys are playing some baseball. That's what they say. The boys are playing some ball. Yeah, the
I mean,
Royals.
I knew they were good. They were good. I thought they were like 5 games over 500
No,
maybe.
they're really good, and I mean Bobby Witt is probably
Yeah.
one of the best shortstops in baseball, if not, you can make an argument that he is, the best. And Salvador Perez, man, he's just a timeless classic. Like the guy's hitting 320 with 10 bombs, 40 RBIs. I mean, it feels like he gets kind of like crap that I think defensively he's definitely cooked, and that's why you see him more at a little more at DH sometimes. But this guy's still a heck of a player.
Yeah. I mean that I mean that's interesting. I wonder exactly how they'll kind of operate at the deadline because it
Seth
feels like
Lugo, shout out Seth Lugo. He's got a 1.72 ERA through 12 starts, 9-1.
yeah.
That is
Okay.
crazy.
So the rotation looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, Brady Singer has been good. Michael Walk
Yeah.
is kind of reliable. Cole Reagan's good pitcher.
No, I mean looking at the rotation, I think that's definitely strong. I think looking at the lineup, they probably would be a little bit short there. Um,
Yeah, they could use some
yeah.
definitely some length out of the lineup for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, at the same time, though, like you look at the Diamondbacks last year, and it's like, truthfully, outside of Carroll and Ketel Marte, who, I mean, Marte was just amazing in the playoffs last
Yeah.
year. But outside of those two, do they have any guys that it's like, oh, we can really rely on this guy to be a consistent, really good hitter? Like, Walker kind of struggled in the playoffs. He's obviously a really good player, but from what he gave you in the playoffs, he wasn't amazing. Coming
Gurriel is a pretty
in.
good player, or
Yeah.
decent offensively at least.
Yeah, I mean, again, like they're it's not an issue. I'm just saying I don't
No,
think they
no.
looked at that team and said, this is a star-studded lineup, and they certainly got the job done.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean that's interesting as well. I think the Yankees, I mean,
they're really good. I hate to
yeah, I mean,
say, but they're damn good. It's gonna be
Judge
so
and Soto is not fun to pitch against for
no,
sure.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see, I think, what happens. I mean, you heard Hal come out and say, this payroll is not sustainable, which, honestly, if they won the World Series this year, I think they would maybe not re-sign Soto just because it's like, okay, we got the ring and like now we can base those comments. I mean, I think they gotta re-sign Soto, and I think he'll probably end up re-signing if they are willing to pay him. Um, but yeah, this Yankees team, I mean, the lineup is incredible. I mean, Volpe's been great for them. Obviously, Soto, Judge are just an unstoppable duo. Giancarlo's even, shown the power this year. Not, I mean, he's always had the power, but it felt like he's taking more competitive at bats. Um, you know, there have been some like Glaber has been
Yeah,
kind of cooked at the plate. Rizzo's not looked himself. The pitching though is just like really, really good. And Garrett Cole hasn't even thrown a pitch. It's like I don't know who they're going to take out of their rotation because all five of these guys, like the lowest ERA right now,
Nestor,
or the
right?
highest ERA is 3.3 out of their five starters. Like that is bonkers. And the bullpen, of course, is always like they've got, solid guys as they always do in the bullpen. I'm looking at it. Michael Tonkin. How the hell does this guy have a one? Oh, that's must be with the Yankees. Yeah. Dude, the Yankees are a pitching lab. This guy, Michael Tonkin, was on the Mets at the beginning of the year. The guy could not get it out. And now I'm seeing he's pitching to a 1.38 ERA with the Yankees. I mean, that is ridiculous.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
he's been on 3 teams already this year. That is pretty crazy.
he got DFA by the Mets. He went to the Dodgers. He got DFA, or no, he went to the Twins. He got DFA by
Twins.
the Twins, and then the Mets picked him back up and DFA'd him, and then the Yankees picked him up, and he's stuck. So I mean, good for him at least. But Clay Holmes, is he allowed? Like he's allowed barely any run. I don't know, man. This Yankees team is gonna be really tough to beat. They're pitching. I still like Marcus Stroman, like this is a guy who he's a classic. First half is elite, second half kind of goes off the tracks a little bit. Rodon, can this sustain? I think so. I mean, he's shown it. He's not really the concern. I think Nestor Cortez, another guy where I'm like, I don't really know come October if I really want to trust him in a big game. Clark Schmidt, I think, is going to be a really good pitcher and someone that I hope they keep, as well as Luis Gill in that rotation. I think those guys are the future. They're on cheap contracts. Like that's so big for them. But I will be very interested to see what they do when Cole comes back with that rotation. I mean, maybe it'll just time out that, someone is injured or someone needs a little bit of rest, but it's going to be interesting to see because, the five guys, in that rotation right now, none of them deserve to lose their spot. So the Yankees are in a really good spot. I mean, I think if I had to pick someone to win it all right now, I would probably lean them over the Phillies with a close second. Like, I think the Yankees are just so complete right now and just so talented. And I mean, the Phillies also, that 1, 2, 3 in that pitching rotation is deadly. Like Wheeler, Nola, and Ranger Suarez, who's been arguably the best of them all this year. Both those teams are loaded. Great. I don't know. I'm ranting. I don't know if you have anything to say or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, like it's weird because I mean this is just a thing I've been noticing around baseball this year. It's like you said, like, and part of it is like Michael Tonkin probably just happened to pitch better, with the Yankees, but like what exactly is going on here where it feels like there's guys like Teoscar kind of sucked with the Mariners last year, and that was definitely an outlier year.
He's been a
More than
solid. I mean, he's a silver slugger. If he's a solid player. Yeah.
No, I mean he's a solid player, but I just feel like a lot of these guys like they get traded or moved around from these other teams, or it's like Hoffman kind of was never a good pitcher and now immediately comes to the Phillies. He's really figured it out. Like the
Yeah.
coaching and whatever like approach and
It's
you know,
huge.
it's huge.
Especially with pitchers. Like pitchers, it can really change because the recommendation to add a pitch or drop this usage, like it really does, I think for pitchers especially, it's much easier and frequent to see, and compared to other sports where it's like when you change teams, it could literally, change your career based on what you're recommended to throw. Sorry for interrupting you, but
No, no, absolutely. Especially because like, you're not hitting, your hitting isn't based on how your teammate is doing. It's really just you and the pitcher.
yeah,
You know, it's a team sport, but most of the things you're doing are individually based. But it like you said, the team you go to really can change a lot, which is interesting. Like, Zach Eflin, who was on the Phillies in
yeah,
22, really struggled at the end there, and now he's gone to the Rays. I don't know exactly how he's doing this year, but he really like kind of turned his career around last year. I mean, yeah, like you said, so that's a big thing is it's just like, are you able to kind of like, get good innings out of guys you didn't expect? I still kind of look at the Yankees lineup and obviously, like I said, Soto and Judge is never going to be fun to play. You know, those two, you don't want to walk the other, obviously. You don't want to walk, you don't want to walk one, obviously, and get the other, at bat with the other on base. Especially because it's like, Judge is kind of your more typical, power hitter. but he draws a ton of walks. And then Soto obviously has some of the best discipline in the game. Like, I mean, I don't even know. That's probably the best 1-2 in baseball, I
Oh,
think. Also
easily.
the Dodgers
Oh yeah, that's
do exist. I guess, yeah, I mean, truly I would say the top three teams so far this year have a top end of the lineup that's really been elite. Um, but you know, Volpe's been really good. I'm obviously not questioning his status on the team. Just, will he quite keep up the pace he's been on? Kind of slow down a little bit from the really torrid start there. And then outside of that, I do have some worries, like, you know, I kind of expect Glaber to turn it around at least at some level, but outside of that, how many of these guys are really performing much worse than you could expect? Like, I think Stanton is giving you about what you'd expect. Rizzo, I guess, could be in the same boat as Glaber, but I mean, ultimately, I don't
he's
know.
yeah, he's in his latter stage of his career for sure.
Yeah,
Rizzo.
I guess my point would be here that I'm not sure if if Judge goes on a cold streak again or something like that in the playoffs or whatever happens. I don't know if they quite have that lineup depth um of the I guess really the Phillies I'm kind of thinking of. I kind of sound like a biased fan here, but I mean, truthfully, I do feel like the Phillies lineup depth is something that a lot of these teams don't have. I mean, I guess the same could be said about Castellanos, where it's like, you
Yeah,
know, he might just be kind of past, what he once was. Um, but that's an interesting thing here. I think, the Orioles, I was very high on them last year. But I kind of still have the same feeling. I mean, obviously Corbin Burns helps not having Bautista. He's not pitching. Yeah, no, he had
no, he's
nothing.
after here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. So I mean, obviously that's, I guess
they
kind of
got
a
your boy Craig Kimbrell in the ninth inning.
oh, I mean that's honestly the biggest thing I'm worried about here. I
Yeah,
mean,
I just still think it's with the Orioles, it's just not like it's not their time yet, which is like they're gonna be a great team, but like for a championship, like this team, like, they're gonna be so good for so long. That's the thing. It's like this team, like I mean, obviously the Jackson Holiday stint like didn't go to plan, and I think they kind of rushed him up a little
I
bit,
agree.
for being honest. Like the guy was in AAA for like 10 days. He got drafted like a year ago out of high school. Like just let him get his at bats in. But like Gunnar Henderson is one of the better players in baseball. Adley
Awesome.
Rutschman, one of the best catchers. And then they've got all these other young guys. Jordan Westberg's hitting 291. Colton Cowser got off to a really hot start. He's cooled down since. You got Kiegerstad in AAA right now. I think. I mean, there's so many guys with this team, and obviously, I think new ownership as well. Hopefully they're willing to invest a little more than the past, and I think locking up Corbin Burns long term, assuming he is willing to stay there, would be massive. And when you get Bautista back, that's going to help that bullpen a lot, which is okay. It's probably middle of the pack. Um, you know, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I agree with what you're saying though. I think they're really good, but I'm still not like ready to be like they're going to go win the championship this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, no, I mean the future thing, like you said, like I mean, I guess Santander's kind of been a mainstay for a while, and
Yeah,
he's I guess having his worst year in a while.
they're going to
But
be
I
so,
don't think he's like
like once
completely.
Holiday gets
Yeah,
up and is like playing, like
I mean, it also like as a more casual fan who kind of just hears about these guys when they perform as
yeah.
get as opposed no, I mean truly like I don't
No,
know
I'm
most.
in the same boat with you this year, to be honest. Like I have not been as in tune to baseball as I probably will be. I mean, yeah.
But I mean, truthfully, it does feel like every other week they kind of spawn a new like fratty kind of looking white guy.
It's like,
Like, I
oh,
mean,
he's up from AAA and he hit 5 home runs this week. Whoa.
I think they're just taking like some frat from Virginia and taking these kids and somehow turning them into great ball. And they all look this. I hate to say it.
They
This is really
do. It's
bad,
all
but
these
now
like country Southern boys, like literally copy and paste. Long hair, they got the flow out the back, and it's crazy. But and they're all freaking amazing baseball
yeah.
players.
I mean, it's awesome. I mean, the good thing about baseball here is I guess they don't quite have to worry about paying most of these guys at least for a couple years.
Yeah, they
Uh,
got those guys locked up for
yeah, but
life.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is, if the Orioles, everything was the same, but they just had the market size of a New York or LA. I mean, watch out
Dude,
because
imagine if they had like, you know, a Mets or a Yankees or a Dodgers level like payroll capacity with this core they have. I mean, they would just go out this offseason and buy, an entire pitching staff and probably win the World Series.
yeah, I mean that's the fascinating thing. I mean, the other interesting thing, like you said with the Orioles, like they might be as good, at this moment as their record would suggest, but they, you'd be very hard pressed to imagine that they'll do anything significant at the deadline, trade anyone that matters to them in the future at
Yeah.
all.
I mean, they've
Just
got such a
because
deep farm, they can probably afford to
I
lose
guess
some
that is
guys. But yes, I mean, none of these top 50 guys are going anywhere that they or like top, I mean, obviously Jackson Holiday is like an untouchable player, but they've got, I mean, I'll pull up the MLB top prospects. Like there's a lot like 100%, like a lot of these guys, unless I mean, the only thing that would change would be if you're trading for a superstar who's like under team control for multiple years, but I think baseball as a whole has gotten away from trading top prospects for
Mhm.
rentals just in general. But yeah, I mean, looking at the top prospects, like Holiday's number one. I've never heard of this guy. Samuel Basalo, catcher, first baseman, is the 14th best prospect in
Just pulling
baseball.
them out.
They're just literally pulling them out. Kobe Mayo at number 20,
Yep.
third baseman, hitting 291 with 13 homers, 37 RBIs, had 29 homers in the minors last year. Heston Kiederstad, number 22, uh, hitting 336 in AAA with 13 homers. Uh,
Has their like double A team like lost a game?
I like it's actually just ridiculous. Like I forget about. I mean, that's all they have in the MLB's top 100. But what's that? Like five guys or four guys in the top 25 and top 22.
Yeah.
They're all
And that's not
position
even
players too.
including the young guys who are already really good.
Yeah, that's not even including like Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, who are already like the best players at their position in baseball. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's unreal. Yeah, I mean we didn't even really talk about Adley and like he's, I would I mean this year at least, he and Real Muto to my knowledge and Contreras has both have been
Yeah,
really good,
William
right?
Contreras, dude, that guy's on a
Didn't
tear.
talk about him with the Brewers, but um yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean, he's awesome. I mean, and like I said with Real Muto, like Real Muto, I think over the last, I think since he signed with the Phillies, has caught like 1,000 more innings than any other catcher or something ridiculous. Um, yeah, I mean, he's just an Iron Man, and then
He's a
he's
tank, yeah.
also, yeah,
And he
it's
can hit.
something crazy, right?
It's crazy.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, and then he's also, someone you're happy to have in that top half of your lineup, middle half, whatever you want to have, wherever you want to have him. Like you're probably comfortable, with Turner out, he's been hitting in the 2 hole a lot of these games. With Turner back, he might be in the 5 or 6 hole a lot of these games. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. He's a complete Iron Man, good defensive player, but like I'm saying, Rutschman has a lot of those qualities, and then obviously just being a top, top part of your lineup hitter as well. I mean, that's super valuable. I also feel like are switch hitting catchers super rare. Am I wrong to say that?
There's a few of them, but it's not like super frequent. Yeah, at least ones that have been like stars. Like I'm trying to think of like other like I think this I think Manny Pino was one who this cat like kind of a
I
journeyman. I don't
know
know why he just popped in my head, but he might have been a switch hitting catcher.
I know Jorge Posada was. I don't know why I know that.
No, he throws right. He bats right. As Jorge Posada, I think was yeah. I don't know. That's a good switch hitters have I feel like just kind of died down in
They have
general.
died down for sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I mean, I guess it's fair because theoretically if you're a righty and you can hit well against righties, I think you should just try to master that.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of always having the like platoon advantage. But at the same time, having, two switch hitters in your lineup that are mainstays,
Big.
it's big, you know. Um, but again, I do think at the same time though, like, you look at a guy, like Bryce Harper, it's like I don't know exactly what the splits look like against lefties, but can't
Yeah.
imagine that he's some drastically different hitter against lefties, even though he's hitting lefty. So, I mean, again, like to that point, like Harper is going to hit 3 in the lineup against lefties and righties. So I guess that's I guess maybe part of it, but it does feel weird that that's become less common. Do you want to talk about Ellie? Ellie's my favorite player.
Yeah, we can end talking about Ellie.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think like I was joking about this with my friends. I've potentially made this joke with you before. Like, I feel like if I was a baseball GM, like I would be an idiot for going for all those types of players who it's like he's really tall, he can hit the ball so far, he's really fast, but most of the time, in all honesty, you're not getting Ellie De La Cruz who figures it out this quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I mean, he's still
yes, yeah.
like he
Yeah,
leads the league in strikeouts right now.
yeah, that's what I was about to say is the strikeout is definitely an issue. But to at the same time, I mean, he is an electric player. Like again, yeah, I mean, I think in the same way, people would joke about like the old Raiders where they would always just draft like the fast receiver.
Yeah.
I think I would just always be calling up my prospects who were, super tall, super fast, could hit the ball super far. But yeah, I mean, he's awesome. I mean, he has, I guess the potential. I don't know exactly what he's on pace for this year in terms of home runs, but I think he has certainly the
Died
potential
down a
to,
little bit. Yeah, it's definitely he's not on pace for 40, 100 or whatever it was.
yeah, that was
Nor is
definitely
that going to come close to happening.
yeah.
Maybe the 100 stolen bases, but even that.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think he's what is he like 21, 22 or something like that still.
yeah, he's 22. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that yeah, I mean, I think in the same way Acuna is just an awesome thing for baseball to
Yeah.
have. I think, even right now and especially what he could be in 2 or 3 years, just really awesome for baseball. Like, I mean, I love using him in MLB the show. I feel like he's like actually like the video game type character, I feel like, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely.
I
He's
mean, he's like
great
what six
player.
five can run, about as fast as anyone, has hit the ball super hard at times, switch hitter as well. I mean, theoretically, he has everything you could want. Obviously, like you said, is he actually leading the league in strikeouts?
Yeah, he's got, I think, 70. I was just looking at baseball reference, his baseball reference page, and it was bolded. So yeah, he has 74 strikeouts and 201 at bats.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's definitely something he has
that's
to work on. But at the
it's like a
same time,
35% strikeout rate.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely an issue.
So he's a guy where, like, I mean, he went on that tear, but like his season, like he'll end up like maybe batting around like 250 or something like that. Probably have like 20, 25 homers and like 70, 75 steals or something like that. Like he's gonna be a great player. I just don't think he's at that level yet.
I mean, there was like MVP hype a few weeks
Yeah,
into the
no.
year, if I'm
He's
not
he's
wrong.
already I was looking at he's only batting like 249.
250, yeah.
His OPS is below 800. Like he's cooled down a little bit for sure.
Yeah. No,
But
I
still
mean,
super fun player,
yeah.
100%.
No, I mean, yeah. Like, I mean, just wonder, I guess, like, what, like, do you think he'll ever, like, do you think he's just always going to strike out about as much, as any of the top, consistent starters, or if,
It's
like, do you
tough. I
think he
mean,
could,
when you're striking out like that much, I think it's tough to like he's never going to be a guy that gets that strikeout rate probably to like 10, 15%, but he could get it down. I mean, he's still so young. Like I think just with some plate discipline and I think probably a better approach, he'll get that number down. I mean, he's still so young and that's not uncommon to see, with rookies or young players. So but I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that we look at as someone who doesn't strike out a lot based on, the start to his career. But we'll see. Who knows?
yeah, I mean, and again, this is my last point here. We can wrap up in a sec, but like Schwarber is always going to strike out a ton, but
Yeah,
he's,
no, he's still, and
yeah,
Ellie's still going to be a great
that's
player.
what, yeah,
He's going to be probably very well may get to that star level one day if he can just kind of, put the approach together a little bit better. Because obviously he's got all the tools. It's just a matter of consistency at the plate for him, I think is just the key.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah,
I'm
you can
good
wrap it
to
up.
wrap up. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, this has been an awesome episode. We definitely went on for a while here, but peak basketball season. I'm really
Yeah.
excited. We haven't talked in a while about, a lot of these matchups. Guess we didn't really talk about the Knicks and stuff like that. I mean, the Knicks kind of just ran out of gas. I feel like there's not much to say there. Um, you know, I guess I think we did talk when the Nuggets had lost. So I guess we weren't really that far behind. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean the NBA, the finals, like we talked about at length, is going to be awesome. I think these are probably the two most complete teams. You know, even over a full, full sample size here, I think these are
Yeah.
probably the two best teams in the league. At the very worst, two of the four best teams in the league to me. Um, and yeah, I mean the baseball season's heating up. Obviously, the deadline always is huge. Obviously, it feels like there's three or four different seasons within a season. Kind of like we talked about with the Pacers, but you look at the Rangers last year who won, they started off super hot, cooled down, then completely turned it back around. There's obviously, tons of time to go in this baseball season. So we haven't talked too much about it. But it was good to kind of get a good, look around the league, see how everyone's doing, see how we think everything will shape out. Obviously things will only start to heat up with baseball from here on out. Um, yeah, I mean, we should be getting back to mostly every week. So looking forward to that, and we'll see you guys next time on Outside the Arena.